Good morning students. In the chapter Reproduction in Plants, the next topic that we will be learning today is sexual reproduction in plants. So, what is sexual reproduction? Sexual reproduction is a kind of reproduction in which two individuals are required for the production of offsprings. Each of the parent produce gametes. The gamete produced by the male is called as the sperm, and the gametes that is produced by the female is called as the egg. The male and female gamete fuses to form the zygote. The majority of flowering plants reproduce sexually. The flower is the reproductive part of the plant. That is, both male and female gametes are produced by the flowers. Sexual reproduction in plants takes place in the flower. The complete flower typically consists of four parts, which is the sepals, the petals, the stamens, which is the male reproductive part, and the carpel, which is the female reproductive part. A flower which consists of all these four parts are called as a complete flower, while a flower which lacks one of these four parts are called as an incomplete flower. Stamens is the male reproductive part and it consists of anthers and filament. The anther is a sac-like structure that produces and stores the pollen grain, while the filament is a tube-like structure that supports the anther. Coming to carpels, it is the female reproductive part and it comprises of three parts, which is the stigma, the style and the ovary. The stigma is the topmost part of the carpel. The style is a long tube which connects the stigma to the ovary. And the ovary contains lots of ovules which contains egg cell. It is a part of the plant where the seed formation occurs. Now, we shall study the types of flower. A flower may consist of either stamen or carpel or both. Based upon this, a flower can be either unisexual or bisexual. A bisexual flower consists of both male and female reproductive parts in the same flower. Example is rose, beans, hibiscus. Whereas plants like papaya and cucumber consist only male or only female reproductive part in a single flower. Thus, the flowers are called as unisexual flowers. This picture depicts the female flower of cucumber which consists of only the female reproductive part. And this picture depicts the male flower of cucumber which consists of only the male reproductive part. Hence, these flowers are called as unisexual flowers. So once the gametes are produced by the male and female reproductive part, the next process is pollination. The pollen grains are tiny structures which develop inside the anther, and when the anther matures, it splits open and releases the pollen grains. The pollen grains have to be deposited onto the stigma in order to fertilize the egg cell which is present in the ovary. The process by which the pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma is called as pollination. The pollination is of two types, which is self-pollination and cross-pollination. When pollen from anther of one flower is transferred to the stigma of same flower or to the stigma of another flower present on the same plant, it is called as self-pollination, as you can see in this picture. Whereas, when the pollen from anther of a flower is transferred to the stigma of the flower present on another plant, it is called as cross-pollination, as you can see in this picture. The pollination to happen, it requires certain agents, which may be insect, wind or water. Now, we shall study each of these agents. First amongst it is insect pollination. The flowers of insect pollinated flowers are usually large, bright colored and scented to attract the insects. Example of flowers which are pollinated by insects are rose and hibiscus. Insects like bees, butterflies, beetles visit the flowers to collect the nectar. While feeding, the body gets coated with the pollen grain, which will be carried by them to another flower, thus pollinating the flower. The next agent of pollination is wind. The flowers of wind-pollinated flowers are usually small, dull or pale colored and not scented. Example is flowers of rice and wheat. The flowers produce large quantities of pollen grains and also they have well exposed stamens so that the pollens are easily carried away by the wind. The flowers have a long and feathery stigma to easily trap the airborne pollen grains. And the next agent of pollination is water. Aquatic plants such as Australian seagrass and pondweeds are pollinated by water, where the pollen grains floats in the water and when it comes in contact with the flower, it gets deposited in the flower, thus pollinating the flower. So once the pollen grain is deposited on the stigma, the process of fertilization must take place, where the pollen grains must germinate and grow through the style to reach the ovule. The pollen contains two cells, which is the pollen tube cell and the generative cell. The pollen tube cell grows into a pollen tube through which the generative cell travels. The generative cell splits into two cells to form two sperm cells. One of the two sperm cells fertilizes the egg cell, forming a diploid zygote. So, after fertilization, the ovary grows into a fruit and the ovules develop into seeds. So, during fruit development, the petals, stamen, stigma and style dry and they fall off. And the fruits develop containing the seeds. And each seed contains an embryo which consists of a radicle that will develop into a root and a plumule that will develop into a shoot. And also the seeds will have one or two cotyledons that store the food for germination. The seed eventually hardens and dries to survive adverse conditions, which will develop into a new plant under favorable conditions. Now we shall study about seed dispersal. The dispersal of seeds ensures that the seedlings are distributed over a wide area. This avoids overcrowding of the plants. Seeds are distributed by different agents such as wind, water, animal. In wind dispersal, the seeds that are dispersed by wind are usually small and light in weight. Example is the seeds of Tecoma. While the seeds of cotton have long and fine hair surrounding them, which makes it easy for the wind to carry them. Seeds of plants like maple and dodonia have wings that help them to float in the wind. The next agent of dispersal is water. Seeds dispersed by water are contained in a light and buoyant fruit, giving them the ability to float on the water. Example is the fruit of coconut, which has air trapped in its husk. This helps it to float on the water. While seeds of plants such as lotus, which grows in water, usually disperses the seeds in water, which when comes in contact with soil under favorable condition will grow into a new plant. The next agent of seed dispersal is animal. Seeds of fleshy fruits such as mango are thrown away by the animals after eating them. While birds and some animals eat some fruits such as guava, berries along with the seeds. The seeds will be excreted in their droppings as they remain undigested. While some fruits and seeds have stiff hairs, spines or hooks which sticks to the fur of animals or to the clothes of humans and are carried for long distances and are dispersed. Example is Setaria and Xanthium. Another method through which the seeds are dispersed is the explosive dispersal, where fruits of plants such as balsam, pea, geranium burst open and explode when they dry. In that cases, the seeds are scattered away from the mother plant. So, after the seeds are dispersed, under favorable conditions, the seeds germinate to form new plants. During the germination, the seeds take up water rapidly and this results in the swelling and softening of the seed coat. The water and oxygen enters the seeds and starts the activation of the enzymes. The seed activates its internal physiology and starts to respire, and thus it metabolizes the stored food to produce energy. The plant embryo uses the energy to grow, where the radicle emerges and grows downward to form the primary root, and then the plumule emerges and starts growing upward. Later, the cotyledons becomes the first leaf of the seedlings when the seeds germinate, and tiny leaves sprout to the end of the shoot, and these are called as foliage leaves, which starts to carry out the process of photosynthesis, and thus the plantlets become independent and grow. By this, we come to the end of sexual reproduction in plants. Thank you, students.